Way back in January, I made a promise to give you guys a Radio Chatter podcast every single week. And here we are at the end of the year, and I've done it. I need some horns or something. Ta-da! Well, today we rewind 2016 and give you the best of David Draiman from Disturbed, William Duvall from Alice in Chains, Joe Perry from Aerosmith and Hollywood Vampires, the DeLeo Brothers from Stone Temple Pilots, Kirk Hammett from Metallica. I mean, I've had some pretty big names on the Radio Chatter podcast, and we'll get into some of the best of today.
T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 2, 1, and liftoff.
This is Radio Chatter with WRIF's own Meltdown.
This is part one of the Best of Radio Chatter podcast for 2016. Thank you guys so much for checking it out. I tried to get some stuff on this one on part one and part two next week. That, I don't know, it's not so timely. You know what I'm saying? I didn't want them talking about stuff that was coming up in the next week. You're going to hear a little bit of that, of course. But I want to get some stuff that was like kind of universal and could use, at any time. And plus, I want to get some stuff that was, real substantial as far as the content and as far as stuff that, possibly made news. There's a couple stories in here, a couple interview bits I did that actually made news on rock and roll websites across the country and across the world. We'll tell you about that coming up here in a bit. But in the meantime, let's start with David Draiman and Disturbed. Their band reformed in 2016, played two shows right here in Detroit. One in a small club, St. Andrews, which holds about, 1,800. Then they came back a couple months later and did DTE with like 15,000. And boy, were they good. We started talking about the upcoming tour schedule and whatnot, and the fact that they were playing Ozfest in fall. While that might be a great thing, it was kind of a depressing thing as well as David Draiman got into it.
Yeah, their last performance in the United States.
Oh, is that Black Sabbath's last show?
In the U.S., yeah. They're going to be doing some more outside the U.S., but that's their last performance ever in the United States. So it's an honor to be supporting them for that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that Black Sabbath. That's pretty cool. I was thinking about this today. I was looking through my rock room, and I'm like, I don't know if I got any pictures with the guys. And then there it is. I saw it, a picture of me and you from right after when The Sickness was just released. I mean, it's that long ago. And you guys were actually playing on Ozfest. If I'm not mistaken, you guys got kicked up to the main stage, didn't you?
That was our second year. Yeah. That was... sometimes the powers that be force the hands that exist. Our fans, as they always do, spoke louder than we ever could, and made it necessary for security reasons and for safety reasons for us to be moved to the main. It was something we didn't want to have to do. Back in the day, I was all about bodies on bodies. I loved the vibe of the second stage. I thought that pavilions were like stifling. You have seats, it kind of sterilizes people a little bit, but it's harder to move them. But we had to learn the hard way. We got moved up whether we wanted to or not.
Well, that was pretty cool because that song became obviously a big, huge hit, and it pretty much catapulted your career.
Yeah, it definitely took things to the next level. I mean, people forget that it's interesting because it seemed to eclipse everything else that went on that cycle. People forget that Stupefy was the first single off the record.
I forgot that too.
You know what I mean? That it was a hard sell at radio originally, and that it grew into a huge hit. One that actually solidified our position on the first Ozfest that we were on. People are forgetting that Voices was the second single on that record, and people are also forgetting that it was actually radio itself that really was the catalyst for having Down with the Sickness become a single. Radio started playing it on its own. It was never even meant to be a single. So everything happens for a reason.
David Draiman from Disturbed. I forgot how good that band was until I saw those guys again this past summer at DTE. Man, they are so good, and David Draiman is such a great singer. If you get a chance to see them in the future, or if you've seen them in the past, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Actually, brought the stage down at one point, did The Sound of Silence. Really cool stuff, which they're nominated for a Grammy Grammy for. So good luck to those guys coming up in, February or something when they announce the Grammys. Anyways, switching gears to Chino from the Deftones. I've had a chance to interview him a few times. This one was over the phone. And I'll tell you what, while listening to the record for the first time, Phantom Bride seemed to stand out a little bit more than the other songs. That's because Jerry Cantrell was on that track. I asked him how he got Jerry to play on a Deftones record.
Well, Jerry's been a longtime friend of ours, of the band, and we were pretty much done with the record almost. I mean, and that song itself was actually pretty much done, and we were sitting listening to it, and where the third verse is, where we were just like, what if we replace this verse with the solo, with the guitar solo, and me not knowing how to play solos. Stefan can play solos, but he kind of chooses not to. So, our idea was like, well, who can we get to do this or ask to do this? And Jerry was obviously one of the first names that came up. His guitar style is very distinct, like you said. I mean, you hear it and you kind of know right away that it's definitely stands out. So I hit him up with a text and asked if he'd be interested in it, and he's like, sure, send me the song. Let me listen to it. And the next day he sent me the song back with his guitar on it. Just a demo version of it, but I mean, it was pretty much what ended up on the album, and we were just blown away. I mean, obviously, it's like you hear it, and like you said, it just stands out. Like, you can totally tell that what it is, and he has such a distinct voicing with the way he plays guitar. So we were stoked on it for sure.
Chino also told me this funny story about when he played in a volcano earlier in the year. It was like a stunt / promotion for the new record, and he played in this inactive volcano. And I asked him if that was like one thing that was on his bucket list, and he told us the entire story.
Not necessarily. I mean, I feel like I pretty much lived my bucket list. I already just being able to go around the world and play music, for the majority of my life, it's been an honor. But I mean, that thing came out of nowhere. I mean, it was maybe like a couple weeks. I was already going to be in Iceland playing a show, and my manager called me and said, hey, I got this sort of odd request, and kind of explained it to me, and basically said that, I'd be going down 400 feet into this volcano, non-active volcano, and be performing for 20 people acoustically. So, I thought about it for a second, and it just sounded like something that'd be neat to do. The scariest part for me was, wasn't even so much the volcano part of it, though, was mainly just performing acoustic. I mean, I've never really performed acoustic by myself. I usually always have the comfort of having my band around to cover up my mistakes. So I was sort of, I was more nervous about that, I think, than anything. But definitely once we got down there, I mean, it was a really cool experience, and I think a lot of the people were just kind of like, sort of the surrounding itself, and then the weather was really crazy. So coming out of there, we were almost stuck up there overnight because the winds were so bad that the helicopters wouldn't pick us up. So we had to actually get the Coast Guard to come, and they kind of rescued us out of there and got me to the show because we were actually headlining the festival that night. So I had to get there. So I went straight from the volcano straight to the stage, pretty much, and made it in just in time. So that was kind of the story within the story.
I never heard that before. Right from the volcano to the stage.
Right.
Speaking of stages, had a chance to talk with Rob Zombie guitar player and of course soloist John Five, who's one of the nicest guys you ever get a chance to meet. So nice. But I asked him about the difference between playing on a big stage with Rob Zombie and a smaller stage in clubs doing a solo tour.
I love playing guitar. I love playing music, and it's and of course I love playing the massive shows and the big shows and all that stuff, but I also like playing the intimate shows, and I'm being 1,000% honest with you. I love playing the smaller shows because I'm so up close and personal with the fans, and it's like really a lot of fun. It's kind of like a instrumental Alice Cooper show, and I did it once before. I've been putting on instrumental records for a long time, and I thought I'm going to do a tour and just for fun and whatever. And it was so great, and I had such a blast that I'm keep doing it. I keep doing it because I love interacting with the fans and just getting up there and playing. It's just the best of both worlds.
I also had to ask John about Alice Cooper. I mean, just watching him on stage, of course, playing with Rob Zombie. I asked him if Alice Cooper was an inspiration to him growing up here in Detroit.
Alice Cooper was definitely, a really big influence. My first album was Welcome to My Nightmare. And I would go to 7-Eleven and I got the Welcome to My Nightmare cup, and I was like, oh, cool. There was a 7-Eleven right on Harper and, I think Caju or something like that. So I got this 7-Eleven Alice Cooper Welcome to My Nightmare cup. And for some reason I kept it forever. It's just one of those things you don't really try to keep it, but it's just always there, and so I brought it to Alice. We were doing a tour with him, and he signed it for me, and I just thought that was so cool. Maybe it was hanging around for all that time. So
that's
cool.
wild. Yeah, it's like you imagine being a kid picking up that cup, and then 20, 25 years later, Alice Cooper signing that for you. That's pretty wild. Did you see him, by the way, in the Grammys?
Yes, I thought he was great, and he looks great and he sounds great. What's funny about Alice is his voice has never changed. His voice sounds the same. A lot of artists, when they get older, their voice, changes or something like that. But his voice has always stayed the same, and that's so great. I love Alice, and he's part of Detroit history. Alice and Bob Seger and all that stuff. It's awesome.
From one great guitar player to another. This time around, it's Kirk Hammett from Metallica. He was on Radio Chatter in September talking about the brand new record, Hardwired to Self-Destruct, which of course dropped in November. We talked about touring, talked about a lot of things. But this was in September, and the Black Album had just celebrated its 25th anniversary. And I asked Kirk to reflect on that.
Well, the Black Album is, something that just kind of, it just kind of happened. The Black Album was where our heads are at musically, and it seemed to be in sync with where the music industry and rock radio seemed to be also. So there was a kind of a synchronicity, not synchronicity, but a real synergy with us making the type of music that rock radio seems to have needed at that time. And because we got so much airplay, and we were able to really just get into the minds of a lot of our record buyers. I think it wasn't just the album itself and going on tour for 3 years. There's also the support of radio that made that album what it became, and the fact that radio is still playing it now, still playing those songs now. It just contributes to the timelessness of those songs. So if you put out that album right now, it would just totally fit into the overall musical culture that's going on right now.
Yeah, what a great CD that was. It's funny you talk about this. I just had Dave Mustaine on a little while ago, and I asked him this question. I'll ask you the same question. Where's the weirdest place you've heard a Metallica song in your life?
The weirdest place?
Yeah, like I've been in restaurants before, and I've heard the craziest songs. Like, oh my God, I can't believe they're playing this or whatever.
That has happened to me a lot. I'll be just sitting there, and just all of a sudden, I'll get very subtly reminded about my day job. I'll tell you one thing that was kind of weird at one point. I remember one point in the late 90s, I was driving in San Francisco and on one rock station they were playing Enter Sandman, another rock station they were playing Until It Sleeps, and then on yet another rock station they're playing something off S&M. And it was crazy because it was all happening simultaneously. I thought to myself, wow, we have arrived.
There's Kirk Hammett from Metallica, who were joined by Volbeat and Avenged Sevenfold at a one-off show back in August in Minneapolis. And before they played the show, that week surrounding was really cool. I had M Shadows on Radio Chatter earlier this year, and I asked him about playing that storefront. There's like 1,500 kids there to see Metallica and Avenged Sevenfold, and I asked him what it would have been like if we were kids and saw something like that.
Man, that's what we lived for when we were growing up. It's cool. So we're just trying to keep doing things like that to really, just be a band and have fun. And those are the fun things.
Now, the other day, I know you've probably answered this question a billion times, but you guys played on top of the Capitol building, and that was really kick-ass, and it was like super state-of-the-art and the whole thing, and really 2016. What were some of the challenges that you guys faced, not just logistics-wise, but I mean, was it like jamming in a room with you guys? I mean, you're not running around the place or nothing like that. Was there any challenges that posed to you guys that night?
Yeah, our brains. Like we knew so many people were watching, and there's no crowd to really vibe off of. And we knew that the show was going to be cool visually, but you have to stand there and stare at each other, just like a rehearsal, like you're saying, and then also know that every single thing you sing is going to, potentially millions of people at the same time. But at the same time, we knew that with the album release coming out, that was kind of the cherry on top. So we weren't really as concerned with, if we mess this up, it's going to be the end of the world, because I think people were going to forgive us as soon as they saw the record was out.
Man, I'll tell you what, in this YouTube world, it's like that too. It's like if you screw up something, man, it lands on YouTube and it's there for a long time.
Oh, I know. We've lived through it. So, yeah.
There's M Shadows from Avenged Sevenfold. Johnny Chow from Stone Sour was also on the Radio Chatter podcast back in the summertime, giving us an update on Stone Sour. In this digital age, it's a lot easier nowadays for bands to kind of record things in different parts of the country and spread their ideas. They don't have to be in the same studio all the time. They can do it in their home studio, do it via email, whatever, as Johnny explains.
Yeah, basically all of us, it's a day and the age where, everybody's got some sort of a home studio.
Right.
And, it's one of those things when Corey said, okay, guys, I'm going to be starting up on this Slipknot tour. You know how a lot of it is. It's to hurry up and wait and sitting in back dressing rooms. So send me any ideas, riffs, completed songs, whatever it may be, just start sending them my way. And so we have, we've been to, whether it's like, Kristen's got a whole song, Josh has a whole song, or Roy or myself or Corey, or it's, I've sent Christian, hey, Christian, here's 10 riffs, and he's, me and Christian have pieced together some songs that way. And then when we do get to, we have some sort of a structured song before we even get there, then we all fly out. We all get in that studio together, including Corey, when he's got a little bit of downtime in between tours. And, it's turned out amazing right now. I wasn't expecting how awesome these songs are. They're really solid. Really, really psyched on them. A lot of high energy.
Yeah, the last the records, the House of Golden Bones. I mean, that was fantastic. Some great songs on those records.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. That was really cool. And we feel we didn't really get to finish off the tour of the second album, so to say. So we're really excited about getting this album out. It's just going to be it's not going to be a two-part album, like how House of Golden Bones 1 and 2 was. It's going to be one album, and I think it's hopefully it'll kick everybody's ass, because it's kind of kicked ours, because we've all been really, really excited about this.
That's Johnny Chow from Stone Sour. You'll be able to hear more about the brand new Stone Sour record from the perspective of Corey Taylor coming up next week in the Radio Chatter Best of Podcast Part 2. In the meantime, talked with Dave and Dean from Theory of a Deadman. And speaking about a band that lives all over North America, Dave explained here how those guys create from being so far away from each other.
Yeah, well, because you kind of can get into your own comfortable place, and it doesn't. The thing is, people always say, like, how do you keep the band? You guys just bond together. Man, we spend more time with each other than anybody else. So even if we lived all in the same neighborhood, we would never see each other when we're off the road, because because we just spend so much time together when we're on the road.
Yeah, now, Dave, you say you're down there in Knoxville. Is there a particular reason why you're there? You just because it's beautiful, or is there a lot of music down there, or why'd you move to Knoxville?
Well, I've just met an East Tennessee woman, and she just corralled me.
And did I hear that you're a dad?
That's right.
Man, congratulations. A boy or girl, what is it?
Thank you. I got a boy. He's just over 6 months old.
Yeah. Named him Meltdown, I'm sure?
That's his middle name.
And Dean, of course, Dave's probably been asking you a bunch of stuff about, fathering and parenting, I'm sure, right?
Oh, I don't know if he needs any of that advice. I probably screwed it all up already. So,
me and Dean, we room together when we're on tour. So when we have hotel rooms, it's always me and Dean sharing. So I've witnessed some of the joys and heartaches through Dean. Because I see him, FaceTime with his family, and his girls will be saying, "When are you coming home, Dad?" And I'm just like, "Oh," it pulls at my heartstrings, and then I'll leave the room so Dean can shed a tear and chat with his kid.
I've been in this business for 27 years now, and some of these guys, like those guys right there, I've known for, several years before wives and kids. They were just free-flowing, care to the wind rock stars, traveling the country and the world. And it's funny how over time things change, as they always do, I suppose, because 27 years ago, I didn't have a wife and kids, but here they are. Anyways, one of the funniest conversations I had revolved around kids earlier this year with Niel Fallon from Clutch, of all people. I've never interviewed Niel before. I've hung out with him briefly, and it was a long, long time ago. But he had me in tears talking about his 6-year-old son.
Every once in a while, he'll come to shows, that are local, that are at a civilized hour. But I think my mind would wander too much about, what's the kid doing right now?
Right.
Is he pressing any buttons that he shouldn't be? But not too long from now, he'll be old enough to do that, and I look forward to that.
Yeah, my son is 13 and my daughter's 15, and I've taken them to some shows here and there. I've been doing this for 26 years, and I couldn't wait till I could take my kids. They were old enough to take them to shows. And I don't know, my son seems somewhat bored by the whole thing. I'm like, I don't know if he's spoiled or what, but it's like I thought he'd be a little more excited to go see some of these shows. Maybe your kid will be a little bit different.
Well, it's every once in a while, it's a bit of a head scratcher to me thinking, well, this is his image of what my dad does for work, which for him growing up around it is normal point of reference. And one of the first shows he ever went to, I asked him, what was your favorite part? And he told me the lights. So it's good to get deflated by your kids every once in a while.
Yeah. How old is your son? Because like I said, my son's 13, and I think he'll get deflated a lot more times in life coming up.
No, my kid's only 6.
Yeah, so you got a lot more deflating coming.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I need it.
Yeah, just when you think you've done something really great, your kid will say something that'll just bring you right back down to earth. There's no question about that. But hey, you guys are.
Yesterday, he told me I was the worst pitcher in the world.
No dad wants to hear that.
It's probably true, to be honest. He said, "You're the worst pitcher I've ever played with," and I was like, "I'm the only pitcher you've ever played with." STFU.
Dude, I'm practically crying. I've never heard something so ridiculous. He's 6 years old. You're the worst pitcher he's ever played with. Oh, man.
Yeah, and it's true. I'm the only one. But, hey, I guess you get in where you fit in.
Where does his mom rank?
Well, she hasn't tried. So,
okay.
She's probably better than I am, to be quite honest.
I can't remember the last time I laughed so hard, especially in an interview. I don't know if I ever have before. That was Niel Fallon from Clutch right there telling me about his 6-year-old. Anyways, back in February, I had an interview with the guys from Stone Temple Pilots that made a little bit of news. At the time, those guys were just beginning their search for a brand new lead singer. And as I'm recording this today, in the middle of December, they still haven't found, or at least announced, a brand new lead singer. But apparently in the summer of 2015, they'd actually talked with Johnny Stevens from the band Highly Suspect about the gig. And I asked him about it.
I did reach out to John. When was that? Last August, I reached out to John, and the way John tells it is not actually what went down. I did reach out to John. We spoke, and I think Johnny's an immense talent, great singer. But I did not offer him a gig. I merely asked if he was interested in possibly getting in a room, and God bless him, he stuck to his guns, and he had the courage and the confidence to stick with his band, and those guys were up for a couple Grammys.
Yeah, that was one of the first things I thought of when I read that, was that, man, here's a guy just starting out. He's got a chance to to really hop into a really great band with a great history, and he kind of turned it down to do his own thing. That's pretty cool.
Well, you got to admire that. One thing that really saddened me about that is it was very early on. It was all the way back in August when I spoke to John, and man to man. Now, I don't use that term loosely. Man to man, I asked for his confidentiality in this, and it shows you what kind of man he is.
That moment was probably the most tense moment throughout the entire year on the Radio Chatter podcast. There's the DeLeo Brothers from Stone Temple Pilots talking about searching for a new lead singer. And apparently Johnny let the cat out of the bag, and he wasn't supposed to, and, well, you heard it. That got picked up by a lot of rock and roll websites and radio station websites around the country. Anyways, let's switch gears to Jim Bruer. Of course, comedian, impersonator, rock and roll ambassador. Love this guy. Listen up in this clip in a couple of minutes, because he talked about how really he had no desire to go see the brand new Guns N' Roses, to me changing his mind in about 12 seconds. But first, we talked about upcoming gigs he had. He was talking about some festival dates he was going to do, and perhaps hanging out with the guys from Alice in Chains. I started talking about Alice in Chains. Now, I thought it was so cool that when they opened up for Guns N' Roses here in Detroit, Jerry Cantrell pretty much introduced the band and then said, "I'm Jerry Cantrell, and we're Alice in Chains."
Well, it is badass, and I think Jerry learned from the school of Motorhead. Motorhead, I got to do the Motorhead cruise before Lemmy passed away, and he, all the way up until his last show, would go up and go, he wouldn't even say I'm Lemmy, he'd go, "Hello, we're Motorhead, and we play rock and roll."
Right.
And they would start, "Now is that." And I love that Jerry does that, because although there's people like me and you that kind of grew up listening to Alice in Chains and know what Alice in Chains was, the new generation has no clue. They have no clue what Alice in Chains spawned, what they inspired, or half the bands they inspired. They kind of got with Nirvana, lost in that Nirvana thing, but Alice in Chains was a huge part of that early 90s rock.
Yeah, they were my favorite band, and they were kind of almost the first band that actually kind of broke, because they were on that Clash of the Titans tour, and We Die Young and stuff I was playing on the radio, and I think Man in the Box I was playing kind of just before Nirvana broke.
Yeah, they were awesome. I got to see, and I like them. I was skeptical, and I felt bad for Jerry after that, and I was very excited that he was going back out there and he wasn't going to give up. And I got to say, they sound ridiculous live. They sound ridiculous.
Yeah, no, they're great.
They sound amazing.
Speaking of Guns N' Roses, have you had a chance to catch them on this tour?
No, and I missed them at Giant Stadium, and most likely I'm not going to see them. I grew up liking Guns N' Roses, and I remember I was a diehard fan for a while, but I don't have a crazy mad desire to see them. I like where Slash is at now, and if they put out something new, maybe I'll go see it. But I don't know. I don't have this crazy desire to go see. I saw them with Metallica, and I honestly feel Metallica ended their career on that tour.
Really? I saw that tour, too, in Buffalo, and, man, that might have been the best show I've ever seen in 26 years of doing this radio thing.
It was the best concert, and I think the tragic mistake that Guns N' Roses did was close the show. You had an hour of Master from the builder to the top, with guys wearing jeans and regular shirts, and then you had a top hat and white leather. Take me down, Gilbert. I want you. And people like, what the hell is going on up there? And he was late. He was an hour and a half late. And
right.
I was like, you know what? I'm done with these. This guy's a poser. I'm done with posers.
Well, I'll tell you what. They're going on stage every every show now on time. Sometimes they even showed up early here in Detroit by 2 minutes. They went on stage at 9:40. Yeah, 9:45. And listen, what you think about Guns N' Roses? That's cool. I was like, I'm like a fan, but I'll tell you what. When I saw them go on stage and Duff and Slash were on stage, and Axl came running out, I couldn't believe it. It was one of those moments. It was like I said on the radio. It was like seeing Kiss take to Tiger Stadium for the first time with their makeup on in 1996 in 10 years or whatever it was. That's kind of what it felt like.
You know what? I feel like I got cheated on my youth, and now you're making me. Now you're making me want to go see them. Now you're making me. You just put that little spark back into me.
I'm sorry.
No, that's a good thing. Now I'm gonna have to look at plane tickets to see where they're playing. But I know as a big fan, but now I forget about Duff and Slash and seeing them ooh. This was a big part of history. I forgot about this.
Speaking of history, how about legendary guitar player Joe Perry? He put together the Hollywood Vampires, and they went out and toured this past year. Joe missed a couple of the dates because of, some health issues and whatnot. But Alice Cooper, Johnny Depp, Matt Sorum, Robert DeLeo from Stone Temple Pilots, they toured the country this year. And I asked him about the Grammys, and I thanked him for saving the Grammys and putting a little bit of rock and roll in that TV show when I started the interview out with him earlier in the year.
Well, the guy that runs the Grammys. I've known him for years and years. We've been on. Aerosmith's been on the show a bunch of times, and gotten to know him, and he loves rock and roll, but he knows his music changes, and sometimes you gotta kind of lean a little bit towards what people are listening to, the majority are to keep the show current, but. I was really happy that he asked us to represent the classic rock, the hard rock, that's actually having a big comeback. It's good to see that, and actually to be, to face it, the Hollywood Vampires aren't exactly a household word yet,
Right.
And we're out to change that, but the fact that he had us on, and also that they kind of broke some of the usual rules that they have. It's not like we have at that point we didn't have a single on the charts. Right now we do. We have I think it's number 2 on the classic rock charts, and we're hoping on it going to number 1 next week. But it's pretty amazing when you think about it. Kind of an unknown band, being on the Grammys like that, and also being able to pay tribute to Lemmy, who had just passed away, and I think that if there was a band that you could call, hardcore, hard rock, and live the life, it was that band,
Yeah.
And you could always still count on him to being up at the Rainbow, which was the kind of the tribute that the Hollywood Vampires, the whole thing started with that, with the guys that would hang out there in the 60s, and he was one of those guys that you could still go up there any night of the week, and he would be there, hanging out and living that life, and it was unfortunate he passed the way he did, but it was really good to be able to be the band that paid tribute.
Keep in mind while you're listening to Joe talk and what sounds like coffee cups being rattled around in the background, that this was 7 o'clock my time and 4 o'clock his time. p.m. He did mention that he was out a little bit late the day before, but that he was a good boy the night before this interview. Anyways, I had a chance to ask him about some of the legendary players on the Hollywood Vampires record, including Joe Walsh and Paul McCartney, and he shared some of his memories about that.
Well, all the guys, I mean, Joe Walsh is on there. I mean, you're right, the list is just like who's who of rockers and for just great musicians. But I have to say, for me, the high point was playing with Paul McCartney.
Yeah,
because I met him a couple times just to say hello and that kind of thing, but to actually be in the studio and playing that song what can I say? I'm speechless on that one.
Yeah.
I mean, I can remember being, 12, 13 and watching him on Ed Sullivan. And then here I am, in the studio cutting this track with him. I mean, Johnny and I and Alice were looking at each other going, I can't believe this is happening. Kind of looking at each other. And Paul he was great. I mean, he's like, just came in. It was like just another day at the office, I mean, just the way he just sat down and started playing this song that he had written like 40 years ago, and it was just really an amazing experience. And all this stuff was running through your head. Meanwhile, you're trying to play your best, and it's so it was let's just say it was a very unique 6 hours, and that's probably the one thing that really still stands out in my mind.
Back in the day when I first started in radio, and for maybe the first couple decades I was on the air, bands would come to the station. Not so much anymore. The bands, you pretty much have to go to them, or they call you up on the phone or whatever. But right here in Detroit, where I'm broadcasting from, we're about a solid half hour away from any venue where the bigger bands play, whether it be the Palace, Ford Field, Joe Louis Arena. They're all far away. But when Guns N' Roses opened up their tour here in the Motor City, William Duvall from Alice in Chains was nice enough to come to the station and bring some new tracks from his band GTO, Giraffe Tongue Orchestra. And he was in the studio on my show. He showed up around 4 o'clock, and I've been pushing the fact that he was going to be on the air with us at 5. So he walks in the studio, and I'm like, oh, man, I didn't expect you to be here for another hour. He goes, well, I can wait. I'm like, well, that's cool, man. I'm like, you don't have to wait. He's like, no, man, I'll wait. It's no big deal. He goes, we'll probably get more people listening at 5 o'clock anyways, traffic and what have you. So he sat around in the studio for an hour, and what a great guy he was. And we got into it on the air about his start in Alice in Chains and the first song he ever remembers writing with the guys.
Gosh, well, I remember early on, I was in my apartment in L.A., and Cantrell was like, you want to come over? And I was like, yeah, sure. He lived over the hill from me in Studio City, and he said, I got nothing. And I said, yeah, I don't either. and on the drive over the hill, I saw this napkin on the floor of my car that had gotten knocked onto the floor of the car on the passenger side. And I said, what is this? And I picked it up, and it had the words, so young, so brazen, so unholy on it. And it was like, it must have been something I jotted down and then forgot.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, that's not bad. And so on the drive over, I'm thinking, what can I do? And then I get to his house, and he just kind of had this little music room. And so I went in there and I said, just let me in here for a minute. And he went and watched football and played video games or whatever.
Like a true rock star.
Right. About an hour later, I had Last of My Kind done.
Really?
Yeah. So that was a landmark moment, because I wrote it out and then recorded it right there in that music room there on the little Pro Tools setup he had there. So the demo was done. He came in, we listened to it together, and we just kind of looked at each other and went, yeah.
It works. Now, I talk about this sometimes on my podcast with some of the bands I talk to, but there's something to be said for chemistry. Did you find some instant chemistry with Jerry?
Yeah. We met in early year 2000 when my band Comes With the Fall first moved to LA from Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
So that was kind of how we met, and a mutual friend had turned him on to Comes With the Fall's first album. Like, we recorded an album in Atlanta and then moved to LA with that album done, ready to go, and trying to get shows wherever we could and stuff like that. And we lived in this apartment all together, like, one for all for one, in West Hollywood. So this mutual friend kind of got Cantrell to listen to our record, and she's like, these are my guys from Atlanta and blah, blah, blah. And finally he listened to it, and he was like, once he gave it a chance, it was just like, wow. And it's funny because he actually compared it to when he first heard Appetite for Destruction.
Really?
At first he couldn't get into it. Then one day it just clicked, and he was like, wow, this is awesome. It was the same thing with Comes With the Fall's first record. So that led to us meeting at the Dragonfly Club in LA. And then from there, it was just, fast friendship, and, him jumping on stage with us a lot to play our songs and stuff. And then we ended up touring with him when he was finishing up the Degradation Trip solo album. So we did all that touring with him through 2001 and 2002.
Yeah, that was one of the questions I was going to get into here, but a lot of people on Twitter hit me up, and they're like, yeah, how did he join the band? But you were kind of on Jerry's radar then since early 2000s. So.
Yeah, a lot of shows, man, a lot of one-nighters all over the country and in the UK and stuff. 2 years.
Now, did you grow up an Alice in Chains fan?
Sure.
Yeah.
I kind of come from the scene that predates Seattle and stuff. Like, I was part of the early 80s hardcore scene.
Right.
That kind of that scene, and the music and the sort of values that it sort of espoused kind of made its way to Seattle, and then started morphing, mixing up with metal and things, and that kind of became what people know as grunge. Mm-hmm. And it was a bunch of punk rock kids meeting with a bunch of metal kids, and then they come up with a hybrid of their own, just like there were hybrids happening, in Atlanta, where I was from. There's hybrids happening in Raleigh, North Carolina, where COC came out of, and obviously LA, we had a lot of stuff. Black Flag was one of the first kind of bands that was considered punk that then started slowing down and showing their Sabbath influences on their sleeve. That was all influential on Seattle. And so when the Seattle bands first started coming out with records, whether it was Sub Pop or other things, it was on the radar. And then obviously when it broke mainstream, starting with Alice in Chains, with Man in the Box and stuff, even before Nirvana, that was noteworthy stuff, and then Nirvana blew it all wide open, and, yeah.
There you have it, the Radio Chatter Best of 2016, Part 1. Some good stuff right there, some great stuff coming up next week as well. And Part 2, a couple real moments in the podcast from this past year involved Chris Henderson from Three Doors Down, as well as Matt Dorito from Pop Evil. Both of them, I had them in simultaneous weeks, and they talked about the moment they knew they had to clean themselves up. They had to get off drugs and alcohol and whatnot. And it was really cool. I never really thought about it before, but I guess there comes a time in everyone's life, whether they're overweight or whether they're, kicking drugs or alcohol, that they just know that moment that they have to, clean themselves up. And it was a really cool conversation with those guys. Corey Taylor talks about working with Zach Wilde, talks about the new Stone Sour stuff that we're going to hear possibly in 2017. Had Kim Thale from Soundgarden on there. He talks about Bad Motor Finger and the early part of Soundgarden, as well as the early part of White Zombie with Rob Zombie. Had a great conversation with Rob Zombie. And Brad Stewart's one of the guests on next week. He was the original bass player in Shinedown. Now he's the bass player in Saliva. And he has this great story about Eddie Van Halen coming in the Shinedown dressing room before a gig way back when they started back in the early 2000s, and some other guests as well. In the meantime, I invite you to check out all the Radio Chatter podcasts from 2016. We're just scratching the surface here. If you've liked anything that you heard today, go back and check out the entire interviews, because it's like some of these interviews had a lot of good stuff on it, but I can't put everything that's good on there. So go back and check them out for yourself, and by all means share them. We'll try to do it all over again in 2017 every single week. In the meantime, Part 2 coming up next week. Thank you so much for listening.